Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Stacy Montgomery. I'm the Capital Programs Administrator at the Maryland Historical Trust, and I am here with my colleagues, Alexandria Anderson with the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, and Bill Hirsch, who's the Capital Grants and Loans Administrator at the Maryland Historical Trust. And today, you're attending the AAHPP Grant Program Q&A session. We will be placing a PDF of this slide deck on the website, so you can download that and any of the links in the presentation. You can access them through the PDF. Before we get started, I did want to mention that we've already conducted several workshops and webinars where we have shared general information about the program. So if this is your first webinar, you may want to go back and watch the general overview webinar, which is available on our YouTube site. We are not going to go into great detail on the general information on the program. This is really geared towards organizations that have decided to submit an application, and we'll take a deeper dive at some of the specific sections of the application and provide guidance on how to make your application more competitive. To begin, I'll go over some of the basics of the program for this year's grant round. The AAHPP grant is administered as a collaboration between the Maryland Historical Trust and the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. This grant program funds capital projects for properties that contribute to Maryland's African American history and heritage. And it's a very competitive grant program. We get a yearly allocation of $5 million. And the maximum individual grant that can be awarded is for $250,000. The AAHPP grant can be awarded to nonprofit organizations, local governments, business entities, private individuals, state and federal agencies. If you're a past applicant or past or current awardee, there's no restrictions on reapplying every year. However, if you are a current awardee, it's recommended that you meet with your project monitor for recommendations or advice for any new application. All applicants, except individuals, must be registered with the State Department of Assessment and Taxation and in good standing with the state to apply. For a project to be eligible, the work must be associated with a capital improvement. That means the scope of work that you provide in your application should be construction or construction related, including pre-development services that will directly lead to a capital project. This would include work like ground penetrating radar, engineering studies, historic building assessments, architectural drawings, or building services on top of capital work like roof replacement or painting or window repairs, things like that. The grant can also fund new construction and acquisition. What the grant cannot fund are broader studies like historic context reports, master plans, genealogy, or research for historical interpretation or brochures. Finally, the FY27 application round will close on July 1st of 2026 at 11:59 p.m. We remind this in every workshop and webinar, but staff will not be working until midnight that day. So we strongly suggest that you submit your application in advance of the closing date in case you run into any technical issues with your electronic submission. If you do run into issues that night, you can visit MHT's main grant website for some helpful tutorials, or you can send us an email explaining the issue and we'll follow up the next day and see what can be done. That being said, we're not going to wait up until 11 p.m. on the 1st, and we don't recommend that you wait until 11 p.m. to submit. Okay, so if you're interested in applying, there are a few helpful sites that we recommend that you visit before completing your application. The first is the recording of the general overview webinar on MHT's YouTube channel. You can look at the slide deck from the webinar on the website as well. You will also want to look at the 2026 Solid Theme question, which is on the application. And that question is about a century of Black history commemorations. So you'll want to prepare your answer to that. And if you click on the link that's provided in this, you'll be able to read a short PDF about that question and prepare a solid answer to that. You'll also see at the bottom, there's a link to the program website, and that's where you'll be able to get all sorts of information, including the grant guidelines. Okay, so the program website was updated earlier this year. So I'm going to take a moment to show you what the website looks like. All right, so there are a lot of links and important information that can be found on the website. So to create a new application, you'll want to select the correct version of the application in the blue box at the top of the page. You can apply as an individual if you're a private owner of your site, or if you don't have an established organization that is registered with the IRS or the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. Otherwise, you should apply as an organization. You want to select the correct type of applicant to create a new application. If you have questions about creating a new account, you can visit the How to Apply for a Grants website for more information. To access an application you've already started, you can log on using the grant portal link. You can also visit the upcoming events page for workshop and webinar information for this program and other programs. So there's the grant portal link and the upcoming events link there. And then scrolling down the page, you can find other helpful information, including program basics. You'll find a link to things like the Secretary of the Interior Standards and the easement program website page. Further down the page, you'll find the grant guidelines, which goes into detail about eligibility, the application submittal process, how to complete the application, how applications will be reviewed by the committee, and other additional information concerning timelines, budgets, eligible expenses, and the scoring rubric. You'll also find application documents like the owner consent letter, the sample budget, and photo template. Below that, you'll find technical assistance like the general overview and Q&A webinar slide deck. And below that, you'll see a link to the MHT blog, which has information on previous awardees, which might be of interest. If you've reviewed these documents and you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact the grant staff with questions. Our contact information is on the website and will also be at the end of the presentation. But I just wanted to show you what the new website looks like and how you can find materials on that. Now we'll talk about the application itself. First, the general approach, then some specific sections. When thinking about your application and how to make your application more competitive, it helps to know the team that will review the application, how the team will review the application. You want to focus your energy on the most heavily weighted sections, which we will discuss in this workshop. In your application, be sure to clearly describe your project goals, your organization's mission, and how the overall project will provide a public benefit beyond the needs of yourself or your organization. Be sure your application answers questions like, why is your project important? Why should your project be funded this year? What makes it urgent? What will these funds specifically be used to pay for? And how realistic is your budget? Is it guided by estimates? Reviewers are considering the importance of your site, the urgency of the project readiness, and the broader impact of the project in comparison to others that have submitted. Refer to the grant guidelines and the scoring rubric in Exhibit 7 while developing your responses in the application to get a full understanding of how reviewers are thinking about your answers. In addition to understanding how your application will be reviewed, consider how to make the application easier for the committee to review. Be clear and concise. Make sure that all sections are filled out, even if there isn't a lot of information to provide. For example, many applicants skip the question about other funding sources or just say none, rather than sharing that they have applied for other grants and are waiting to hear back, or that they've maintained the sites through volunteers who will support the project with in-kind services like bookkeeping or project management. Ensure that all the information you want to give the reviewers is in the appropriate section of the application. Paying attention to the smaller details and formatting will help make your application stand out from others and easier to review. A pro tip, if you have applied to the program in the past and you intend to apply again for the same project, please do not just submit your previous application from a past year. Think about the reasons it may not have been funded and revise the application so that those issues are addressed. include important updates like progress you've made or additional support you've received. Submitting the same application over and over again will not make it more competitive. While all the sections of the application are important and should be fully completed, there are 3 sections that are given more weight in the scoring rubric. The project description, significance and urgency and public benefit, impact, and local commitment sections are where the majority of the points are awarded in the scoring rubric. Being descriptive, clear, and concise when answering the questions scored in these sections will make it easier for the review committee to understand your project. Reviewers look at a lot of applications, and we hope that by breaking down the heavily weighted sections, you can understand what is needed to make your application stand out. Now, my colleague Alexandria will talk more about these sections, starting with the project description first.
Thanks, Stacy. The project description section is where you will provide specific information about the capital project you're applying for and how it will be completed. Within this section, the construction project description is where you give a general description of the capital improvements planned for your site. This description may go beyond the specific request for this grant round. For example, if you're raising funds to build a new visitor center on the site that will cost several $1,000,000, and you're requesting AAHPP grant funds for pre-development costs or a specific part of the work, like an elevator, describe the larger plan for the visitor center in the construction project description section. In the grant project scope of work, list specific items that you're requesting funding for from the AAHPP grant this round, this FY27. In the example above, this is where you would list specific pre-development work such as architectural drawings or engineering services, or work related to the elevator design and installation. These items should correspond with the line items in your budget and any estimates you want to submit. You'll be able to upload any estimates that you obtain as an attachment later in the application. When completing the project description section, make sure the reviewers will be able to easily understand your project. List only construction-related tasks in the section. Detail what the grant funds, if awarded, will pay for specifically. Be clear about where on the building or at the site the work will take place. The more specific you can be as to how the project will be carried out, the fewer questions the reviewers will have about your project. If you received previous AAHPP funding or another grant has paid for an earlier phase of the project, include that information in the construction project description section, not the grant project scope of work section. Do not include non-capital work like digitizing records or genealogy research in the project description section. In the key steps and timeline section, you will want to modify the sample timeline provided in the grant guidelines to reflect the benchmarks of your project. The first items addressed should be the most urgent. If you know there's a lot of capital work to be done, but don't know which aspect of the project would be the most urgent, the first request in your application may be a building conditions assessment. If you've received previous AAHPP or other funding for earlier phases of your project and want to include this in your timeline, make sure it is clear to the reviewer that this work has already been funded by a previous grant. Reviewers will be scoring these sections to understand how the project will help protect the historic site, how well the scope of work addresses the critical needs of the site, and how specific and comprehensive the scope of work is. An application that focuses on new construction when an existing building on the site is failing will not be as competitive as one that seeks to restore a historic or existing building and then begin the pre-development process for any new construction. Reviewers will also evaluate how realistic your budget and project schedule are, so be sure to include estimates for each work item, to review and modify the sample timeline in the grant guidelines, and talk to contractors about how long your projects might take and what kind of lead times these projects have. Estimates and timeframes should be provided by contractors for free. You're not obligated to hire a contractor that you receive an estimate from during the application process. All grantees are required to hire through a competitive bidding process following the award, and you should include time for this in your timeline. On the other hand, if your application indicates that you have already hired a specific contractor to do work, your application may be considered ineligible. If your site is historic, please remember, if MHT takes an easement on the property, this will take time that should be accounted for in your project timeline. And the easement conveyance process must be completed before any projects can be distributed. Also keep in mind that the grant cannot fund work that is already underway. So if your timeline indicates the work has already started or will start before the awards are made in December, your application may not be considered. Pro tip, don't forget to include any pre-development costs that may be required to complete your project, which may include a building conditions assessment, like we talked about before, or architectural drawings, or ground penetrating radar. Significance. This section of the application is also heavily weighted. Significance refers to the significance of your site itself. You should discuss the history of your site in detail and its connection to African American history and culture in Maryland. Was the building or site pivotal to a significant local, regional, or national event? Is it associated with a specific person, group, or movement? Is your site within a historically Black community that has been overlooked or threatened by erasure? Please keep in mind that the significance of a place might change over time, often above and beyond what it made important historically. Think about why your site is not only significant to the past, but why is it important today? Was a historic school building later used as a home base for an important civil rights organization? Is your site a cemetery or monument that provides a place of reflection? Does your organization use your site to serve the community and share an important history? Why is this site important to you today? Don't assume that all reviewers are familiar with your community or site. Provide context for any names or places in the application. You know your site better than any reviewer, so make the case for why your site's contributions to African American history and culture in Maryland are important. Pro tip, include information and photos of events or displays that show your site's story or history and how it serves the community. Now, Stacy will discuss project urgency and public benefit.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, here we go. The project urgency falls under the larger project description section in the application. However, a strong answer to this question can significantly impact funding decisions. When completing the urgency section, reviewers are looking to understand the critical issues facing your site. Is the poor condition of the site preventing it from being used entirely? If no action is taken now, what further damage will occur to the building, and how long will it take before that damage is irreversible? Is there a long-awaited opportunity to purchase a site, or is an anniversary associated with your site upcoming that your organization is preparing for? Clearly explain why your project is critical and needs to be funded this round. Projects that can start once this funding is available are more competitive than projects that will need several years to move forward or that require more fundraising to achieve. The goal of the grant funding is to help protect these buildings and sites, not just to address aesthetic or general maintenance issues. So think about what are the most critical items to prevent further degradation of the site and prioritize those work items. If you're applying to refinish the floors or to build an addition and there's a hole in the roof of the existing building or the foundation is deteriorated, the reviewers will note that the structural issues are much more pressing but not addressed, and this section of your application may not score as highly. Likewise, if your project will cost over $700,000 to complete and you don't have the rest of the funds ready, your application will not score as well, as the project still needs a significant amount of funding to meet your target. A pro tip is if you're applying for new construction, you'll still need to make the case for urgency of the project. Will the new building meet an urgent community need? Are you at a critical point in fundraising that you're ready to move forward with plans or construction? Is a lot finally available for sale and you want to apply for acquisition and pre-development? Whatever your project, make the case as to why the funding is needed this round. The public benefit section is another heavily weighted section of the application. There are 6 questions within the public benefit section of the application that get to the heart of how the site is and how it will be used. The public benefit of your project refers to how the completed project will positively impact the broader community or the general public. High-scoring projects have a clear public benefit and will increase access to the site, allowing others who may have no understanding of the site to be educated about its history or to continue to use it as an active space. If the project will allow your organization to enhance historical programming, provide additional public accessibility, or create partnerships with other organizations, you should explain how in this section. Think about how visitors will engage with the site, what history is being conveyed, and how you will use this site in the future. Will a roofing project allow an organization to continue its mission by reoccupying the building or providing much needed public meeting space? Will the restoration of a historic building reactivate a physical touchstone in the community? Will addressing accessibility at your site allow more visitors to understand its unique connection to African American history? Elaborate on how the site will specifically be used to educate the public and if it will stimulate other projects related to African American history and culture. Will interpretive markers be installed that detail the significance of the building? Will school groups visit the site to gain an understanding of an earlier time? If your site is an event space, will a portion of it be set aside for historical education or to display artifacts, primary documents, or other materials that can be easily viewed by visitors? Are there other historic sites in your community that would benefit from the enhancements at your site or that would build upon your site's success? Provide a clear educational component to your project that will illustrate the impact of your project on visitors and how they will walk away with a better understanding of your site. It is best to highlight the educational programming that already takes place on the site and how this project will allow you to expand or provide access to this programming. For those types of projects will rank the highest. Pro tip, include a letter of support from a partner or group that utilizes your site to demonstrate the value of the site to the broader community. So we often have applications that effectively spell out a project, the site significance, and its public benefit, but they're missing some of the documents that we really need to have to create a better understanding of the project or that are required to establish an applicant's eligibility. In the next few slides, we're going to go over the most common documents that are either omitted or not completed correctly. Photographs are probably the easiest way to show the significance of your property, its context, and the critical issues that the grant funding will address. Providing clear photographs lets the reviewers see exactly what the issues are and the severity of the damage that needs to be fixed or the importance of a historic feature that will be restored. At least one of the photos should be a context photo that shows the entire building or site, not just the area where work will take place. This photo will give reviewers a sense of the overall site. And if you're selected for awards, it'll probably be the one that MHT and the commission will use in their outreach material and social media posts. So make sure that the building is in focus, not skewed, and free from obstructions, something that you'd want the public to see later. You also need to submit photos of the area where work will take place to match what's described in the grant scope of work section. If you're applying for roof repairs, be sure to include photos that show the condition of the existing roof. The photos, they should show the deterioration as well, so reviewers can make an informed decision as to the severity of the problem. If your site faces problems like flooding, submit photos after a major rainstorm to show the serious nature of the problem. If your cemetery has numerous headstones that have been knocked over or damaged, include several compelling examples. Good photos can enhance your written narrative about project urgency. You will also, you'll need to provide at least 10 photos as an attachment to your application. we've developed a photograph template that can be used and found on our website and in the application itself. All you need to do is click on the icon in the blank box in the template, and the program will allow you to select a photo from the files on your computer to upload. The template will automatically format the photo to fit in the box. You can add a caption and upload this as a Word document to your application. We cannot accept individual photos, so they need to be uploaded in a Word document. Do not upload individual photos and photo files. A pro tip, take clear photographs of the most critical areas and provide captions that explain to the reviewer what they are looking at. Reviewers see a lot of applications, so help them connect the photos in your application to the specific request at your site. The budget spreadsheet is an important component of your application and is most commonly returned to applicants by grant staff during our internal review process. The budget spreadsheet template is available on our website and can also be downloaded directly from the online application. We ask that all applicants submit their budget request using this template and that the budget be uploaded to the application as an Excel spreadsheet to facilitate any required edits. On this slide, you will see an example of the budget spreadsheet that we will refer to as we discuss. A sample is also available in the grant guidelines. First of all, please remember that all grant-funded requests should be made in nice round increments of $1,000. To complete the budget spreadsheet, you'll first want to list the work items that your organization is seeking to fund through this grant. In this example, we have window and door repairs, foundation repairs, and construction of a new ADA ramp, architectural services, site work, and the construction of a new addition. The scope of work amounts to more than what the grant could fund, but since some of the items funded are pre-development and site work for the new addition, it's helpful to show how the construction of a new addition will be funded to make it clear that it's not part of your AAHPP request. You can see under the architectural services that there's a bit more description to show that this will include designing an ADA ramp, providing project management, and designing a new addition. In the green headed column, you will see a list of all the funds you are requesting from the AAHPP grant this year in this example. The requests in this column should be based upon estimates you received for the work listed. Remember to round up from the estimates to account for price increases or unexpected conditions. The total at the bottom represents the total request for funding this year through the AAHPP grant and should match the requested amount in your application. Please verify that these numbers match before you hit submit and that total requests are made in $1,000 increments. Please do not include non-capital requests that cannot be covered by this grant in the AAHPP grant funds requested column. In the next two columns, you'll list other funds that are already dedicated towards this project. Please do not list unawarded grants or funds that have not been earmarked for your project. Not all projects will have a mixture of funding, and if you don't have other funding, you can leave these columns blank. If you have other funding going towards the project, please make sure it's included in the spreadsheet and it's clear what that type of funding might be. In the blue headed column, you'll list any other state funding that is going towards the project. For example, if you have a bond bill, an MHT capital, or an MHAA capital grant, you should list those in the blue headed column. You'll want to identify any sources of state funded grants. You can also modify the blue heading to list those sources if that's helpful. And you'll want to include those grants in the other project funds section. Remember that you cannot use two sources of state funds to pay for the same service or to cover the same expense. In this example, the AAHPP funding is covering work to the existing building and pre-development services and site work for a new addition. The budget makes it clear that the other source of state funding will go to construction of a new addition. So there's a clear separation of state funding. The only time state funding would overlap is if you're using AAHPP to pay for work, like if you're awarded in a previous year and you're using a portion of a previous award to do some of the work that will be continued through this award if you're given it. You should also clarify this in the narrative. You want to make sure to spend some time, if you have a current award, to explain how there might be any overlap or where your current award is in terms of being spent down. If you've been previously awarded AAHPP for other phases, again, there's an opportunity to write about that in the matching funds narrative to explain where you are and how you intend to spend the remaining funds, but that doesn't need to be included in the budget spreadsheet unless there's some kind of overlap or continuation. There's also columns for funding sources dedicated to this project where you can list non-state funding like donations, local government funds, grants from nonprofits or foundations, or business revenues. You'll want to make sure that you discuss these funds as well in the other funding sources section. You can mix non-state and state funds for the same services. So using this example, the old museum could use the grant from a nonprofit to cover a portion of window repairs and request that the AAHPP funds cover the balance. The final column is where you will total all project funds. When you've completed the budget spreadsheet, please delete the instructional text below the spreadsheet before you upload it to the application. A pro tip is to make sure to include estimates to justify the funding request and the budget. Now, Alexandria is going to discuss organizational documents and project management.
Thanks, Stacy. If you are a business or organizational applicant, you'll need to provide a series of organizational documents. MHT will need a copy of your IRS determination letter or an umbrella letter if your organization is part of a larger organization, a full copy of your articles of incorporation, and a copy of your bylaws, proof that your organization is registered with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, SDAT. You'll also need to show that you're in good standing with SDAT. You will not be considered for a grant if you apply as a nonprofit or business without supplying these documents. If you are not registered or in good standing with SDAT, you can apply right now, and once they receive your required application fees, they will give you a temporary status, which will work for MHT's purposes while they prepare the full good standing letter. Please upload full copies of the organizational documents and not just snippets or certain pages. MHT reviews these documents for all types of information, and if the pages are left out, it could hinder your ability to receive a grant. All applicants must provide a property owner consent letter. The letter states that the owner of the property is aware of and supports the project for which the grant funds will be used. It also stipulates that the owner of the property agrees to the conveyance of a preservation easement or agreement to MHT. If you aren't familiar with easements yet, they are deed restrictions that protect your site or building from inappropriate alterations or degradation due to lack of maintenance. Basically, the easement acts as a sort of a miniature historic district, but just for your site. And MHT will review all work that takes place to an area of a building or site that is covered by the easement, regardless of how the project is being funded. We aren't going to go all over the specifics of an easement in this presentation, but MHT has a presentation for easements on the YouTube channel that was mentioned earlier, if you'd like additional information. MHT may take an easement on any properties funded by the grant that are eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. It's important to note that the property owner consent letter must be signed by the SDAT listed owner of the building or site. Verify the owner listed in SDAT now so you can make any corrections ahead of your submission. Applicants cannot consent to work on a structure or building that they do not own. If a larger organization like a mother church is the owner, please reach out to them quickly to get a letter permitting you to do the project and expressing their willingness to convey an easement. Some organizations have questions about the easement, and we can provide some helpful information to them. Projects with unsigned property owner consent letters will not be eligible for funding. You can also provide letters of support as attachments to your application. A letter of support should be drafted by someone who's familiar with your site and understands the positive effect the project will have. The letters could be from congregants or patrons, ancestors of people who are historically associated with the site, community leaders, other nonprofits that might have an interest in the site's preservation, and local, state, and national legislators. For larger groups like church congregations, consider collecting signatures on a single letter or petition rather than asking each member to submit an individual letter. Aim for 2 to 6 letters of support for your application. The letters of support must be signed by the person who drafted it, or will not be included in the application packet for the reviewers. If you are applying for funding for the exact same scope of work that you applied for in the last year, either through an MHT grant or any other grant, you can use that letter of support from the earlier or different grant request. As long as it's for the exact same scope of work as what is listed in your application, it is not older than 1 year at the time of the application. Pro tip: all letters must be signed by the correct person. While not as heavily weighted as the 3 sections we just discussed, project management is still an important section to discuss and is something that is important to consider before submitting an application. The scoring of this section evaluates who will be on the grant team for the project and what previous experience they have with grants and capital projects. Managing a grant and a capital project require individual or organizational capacity. The administrative capacity section evaluates who from your organization will be part of the grants management team. Forming a grant or a management team can help maintain steady communications with grant staff and contractors to ensure that the project is completed successfully. The application will ask for information on people within your organization who have relevant experience, as well whether you consulted with any other individuals, professionals who might have helped or guided your application. If people within your organization have grants management experience or work in building trades, their involvement may be helpful. The application allows you to submit the resumes of critical team members. These resumes should highlight the relevant experience. Please do not include irrelevant work experience on the resume submitted. If you don't have this capacity within your organization, you may want to consider hiring a project manager and should include this as a line item in your budget request. Project management can account for up to 10% of the total award, but can only be paid out through the grant if the role is competitively bid. The grant cannot pay for someone within your organization to be the project manager. If your organization has already sought input from professionals, or if you've hired a professional in a previous phase, you should also include their role in the grant project under the consultants and partners question and attach their resume. Examples of consultants and partners can be architects, engineers, or contractors. People listed on their consultants and partners section can advise you through your project, but if you have already hired them before a grant award is made, they cannot be paid through the AAHPP grant program. If you have any plans or reports from these partners that are relevant to your project, please upload them as attachments, such as that building condition assessment that we discussed earlier. If you've already done that, please attach that to your application. You can also include architectural drawings or ground penetrating radar reports. Ideally, your team should be led by someone who knows the organization well and is a good communicator. There's a place in the application to include the contact information for key members and to identify a primary contact person. We will be reaching out to the primary contact with any questions or to request missing information over the summer when the staff review each submitted application and after award selection. So please be sure whoever is listed as the primary contact is very responsive to email and available over the summer and in the winter to respond to requests. Hopefully this information will help you develop a strong application for the AAHPP grant round. As a reminder, this slide deck is located on the MHT program website with clickable links. Remember, the deadline is July 1st at 11:59 p.m. Please take advantage of the resources we've shared with you. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us via the contact information on your screen. Thank you.
All right.